I'm Simon. I'm standing before you, and I guess I ought to sort of explain why and what qualifies me to be here. I thought I would start off by saying I've been in this industry, the events industry, for 2 or 3 years, but although I say years, I mean decades. Unfortunately or fortunately, I quite like the industry, and during my time I've launched shows, many failed, a couple succeeded, bought some, sold some, worked on them, and as a training company now I'm an exhibitor in my own right. And for the last sort of 25, 30 years I've been helping exhibitors to try and get the most out of exhibiting. Now, there's a couple of things just that strike me about it. Number one is you can go to any show you like, and there are 2 stands separated by no more than 2 meters of carpet, both doing roughly the same sort of thing. And yet one of them is really busy and one of them is really quiet. And the interesting thing is they've both paid the same amount of money to be there. So the gist of what I want to talk about today is how you guys, not just at Opera Fair per se, but any event that you attend, how you guys can maximise the investment that you've already made. Okay? And quite simply, folks, if you spend, let's say, an extra £1,000 on a more beautiful floral arrangement, you're not going to get an extra £1,000 worth of return by being at that show. All right, so the things I want to talk about, some of them hopefully will be new. Some of them hopefully will confirm that what you're doing is the right thing. It should provoke you into thinking along the lines that will make you have a much more effective show. And certainly it should be a bit of fun as well. In terms of my coverage, I hope to try and address the things that you guys could be thinking about and should be thinking about before we go to an event. Certainly the behaviours that you need to exhibit during the event, and some of the follow-up actions afterwards that will again enhance that result for you. Clearly, folks, I've allowed time for questions, but if you've got any questions, it's not formal, so it's clearly just a case of stop me as we go. Okay, I thought I would start with the de rigueur sort of impressive statistic. And the first statistic I'd like to just bang at you is the fact that, and this is 2010 figures, so it's gone up since, but events contribute about £16 billion to the economy. And we go, oh, yeah, impressive statistic. The problem with a billion, folks, is it's such an enormous number that we actually lose track of it. If I said to you, for example, how long ago would you reckon 1 billion seconds ago was? Was that yesterday? Was that last week or was that last month? What do you reckon? 1 billion seconds ago. Last year? 1 billion seconds ago, folks, to show how big 1 billion seconds ago was 1959. That's how enormously big 1 billion is, right? So it's an enormous figure. Right? Now, I'm not going to guarantee you a 1 billion % return on your investment, but certainly, almost without doubt, a return on that investment that will be better. Simply because, folks, from experience, I know the more of these things that I do when I exhibit, the more successful my return on investment is. Right? There's no mystery to it. It's not sort of trickery, sorcery. It's just simply good or best practice, I guess. And a good place to start is really thinking about first impressions. Because first impressions count an awful lot when it comes to exhibiting. We've all heard those expressions about you shouldn't judge a book by the cover, but people do. Now, take an example, folks, where first impression is really important. Let's say you go for a job interview. How quickly do you reckon the typical interviewer takes before he or she forms a first impression of that candidate? What do you reckon? 5 seconds. I think you're right. As soon as you walk through the door, they form an overall picture. Too tall, too short, too fat, too ugly. Some qualify on all counts. How long is it then, do you reckon, before they decide, yes, you got the job, or no, you haven't? How long does that process take? 10 seconds. Okay, a little bit longer. Okay. The interesting thing, folks, CIM, Chartered Institute of Marketing, reckon that the average interview time, and this is for 2012 to 2013, the average interview time in the UK currently runs at about 50 to 55 minutes. That's the average. Right? Now, bear in mind that there are 2- and 3-day appraisal centres with some organisations. By default, there must be some pretty short interviews to bring the average down to 50 minutes. What they've discovered is in as little as the first 3 minutes, that first impression is more or less fixed. Now, it doesn't mean you got the job in 3 minutes, because clearly there could be 10 other candidates waiting outside to be interviewed. But what they're saying is within those first 3 minutes, they go, yep, subject to the next 10, go to the next step, or actually, no, even if the next 10 are rubbish, I'm not going to employ you. The difference, I think, between the professional and the amateur is the professional is aware of this. And they spend the rest of that interview testing whether that first impression was right or wrong. And the amateur is prone to gutting it short, going, gut feeling, you got the job, or not, as the case may be. Well, let's just imagine, for the sake of this illustration, that we found 2 candidates who were, as near as we could manage it, clones of each other. In other words, each of them had a good point, a bad point, a good point, and a bad point. This person's identical, good point, bad point, good point, bad point. So imagine, background the same, qualifications the same, work history the same, everything the same, apart from one major differentiator. And that is, imagine one of them walks in and created a really good first impression, and one of them walks in and created a really bad first impression. I appreciate that in real life there are plenty of scales of grey in between. Now folks, let's just sort of take this as an example. Imagine real scenario, candidate, really good first impression, candidate, really bad first impression, but everything else identical. What would happen is the first candidate would walk in and create a really good first impression. And the interviewer would look at her and think, hello. Right? But I could be wrong, but I'm professional, I shall test it, because, here we go, let's just test it. All of a sudden, the interview starts off and goes, ha, 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 you see, the moment she walked in, I knew she was good. Rock and roll, okay, there's a bad bit, nobody's perfect. Fine, fine. Oh, see, it's confirmation now, I knew she was good the moment she walked in. Yeah, okay, keep an eye on that, but basically go to the next step, which she does. Seconds later, candidate number 2 walks in. She creates a really bad first impression. Interview looks at her and thinks, she's taking the piss. However, I could be wrong. Please, God, I could be wrong. I can't believe anyone is shite. However, we're here now, might as well go through the motions. First good point, ha-ha, I knew she couldn't be all bad. Ha-ha, couldn't hide it for long. You see, I knew she was dodgy the moment she walked in. Well, whoopee-doo, big, see, it's confirmation. I knew she was shite the moment she walked in. At an exhibition, the very same process happens, probably magnified. When they look at you behaving like a gibbon on your stand, hypothetically, they're not going to think, well, underneath all of that strange behaviour, I bet there are some really nice people working for a really nice company selling some really nice products. They're just going to go gibbon alert and give you a wide berth. The good news, of course, is you could be a gibbon, and as long as you have to behave on your stand, people will talk to you. So the secret seems to be, what can we do? What are the things that get people to talk to you? Now, again, I said it's not rocket science. People buy people. It's a horrible old cliche, but it does work. And actually, when you start thinking about this sort of concept of first impression, you haven't really got that long. On average, they reckon you've got between 10 and 12 seconds. And the rationale behind 10 or 12 seconds is it takes the average visitor about 10 or 12 seconds to walk past the average stand. Unless your stand is very thin and long, in which case you've got a little bit longer. But that's what we're talking about. And in that time, they're going to look up and down, they're going to check you out, check out your behaviour, check out your messaging, check out your graphics, and make a decision which is, yes, I'm going to talk to them, or no, I'm not. So it's also down to your graphics. Now, again, time is our enemy, so I haven't got ages to talk about everything, and I don't intend going through a whole lexicography with you guys, but just to sort of get you thinking along the right lines, there are certain words that I see again and again at exhibitions. It's a shame there's not so many shows on, because you can just walk around any of them and you'll see these sorts of words being bandied around, normally generated by the marketing department. And they'll do things like this, a cheap offer at the show, blah, blah, blah. Folks, if I say to you something is cheap, what is the first thing that goes through your mind?
Crap.
Yeah, crap, right? Cheap and nasty. I can't think of anything you'd like to go around boasting that you own that's cheap. Imagine I said to you, I've got a cheap Rolex. One of 3 things will go through your mind. Fake, stolen, or broken, probably. You're not going to think, oh, it's a bargain, I'll have one, unless you know people like that, in which case tell me, because I've got a few. Right? The concept with cheap is we don't really want anything that's cheap. If you go out and you buy a cheap suit or a cheap pair of shoes, you don't say you bought some cheap shoes or a cheap pair of... What do you say? It was a bargain. I saved a fortune, it's cost effective. Yeah? Use all these nice words to justify it was cheap. Because, of course, it wasn't cheap, because cheap implies it's low quality. Likewise, folks, this one here, it's free. If I say to you something is free, first thing goes through your mind is, where's the catch? Yeah, nothing's free. Right? And actually, even if it were free and there is no catch, then what do you think? Yeah, I don't want it. If they have to give it away free, how can it be? It's like free advice. How great is that going to be if they can give you free advice? Yeah? Now, the problem with free, folks, is we're normally too busy doing our day jobs to recognise why sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. And hopefully in the next few minutes, I hope to debunk that. Free will work if you can see the catch up front. So, for example, buy one, get one free, that works. Because the catch is you've got to buy one in order to get one free. Same with 15% extra on alcohol or whatever. That works. You can't go to an off-licence, crack open a can of beer and go, I'm just having the free bit, thanks very much, see you later. You could try that, it doesn't work. Because the catch is you have to buy the wretched thing to get the 15%. So, when you start thinking about what you guys are doing at your event, often we think, oh, well, let's give them something free. Or let's do... And again, the problem is that it actually sabotages the message that you're trying to get across. Now, think about this as a really interesting point, because we've done this. When you go to a hotel, they don't give you a free upgrade. And they don't give you a free breakfast or a whatever. And when you're travelling, they go, Mr. Naudi, come in, have a free upgrade to first class. They don't do that. You get those things, but they don't call it free. What do they call it? Complimentary. Because, folks, complimentary means exactly the same as free, but without any of those negative connotations. You don't go, yeah, complimentary, where's the catch? You just don't do that. Complimentary implies it's worth having. So think about the graphics that you have up on your stands. Are your messaging, or is your messaging, the right one? Is it influencing the people walking past your stand in the right way? Because we know a thing or two about our visitors. Lots and lots of work has been done and research. We know they like the choice. One of the things is we know the more exhibitors you have, the more different product sectors you have, the more services on, the better it's going to be for them. We know the downside to that is it can be confusing, but organisers are aware of that, and they normally segregate it and colour-code it or whatever else. That's a good thing. But the most important thing to bear in mind, especially where we are in the economic climate, is that most of the people that walk through those doors have not been coerced, bribed, or threatened to be there. They want to be there. So you have got potential customers walking past your stand who want to be there and want to do business with you. And I guess where we are in terms of getting out of the recession, it's a perfect time to approach those people. But we often don't, because we just expect them to come and approach us. Now, in terms of your objectives, when you go to a show, I suppose there's three things to think about. One, what do you want to achieve by being there as a company? And do you all know what that is? Two, do you understand what your visitors want when they come to a show? What are they looking for? Can you guys give them that? Because in a way, those first two things should determine your role in terms of how you behave during the days of that event. And I'll give you an example if I might. Let's just say, for example, at Opera Fair this year, you decide your corporate objective is a massive data capture exercise. Okay? You want to get as much names and addresses and phone numbers and emails, whatever, of visitors as possible. So you think, right, we want as many as we can. What are we going to do? What's a good strategy? How are we going to get lots of people on our stand? And we think, I know, we'll give them something free. No, let's make it complimentary even better, right? So you decide you're going to give them complimentary beer. And everyone's going to get completely drunk. And then you think, hang on a minute, corporate social responsibility, probably not a good idea. Let's just give them tea and coffee. So, fine, fair enough. So you set up an area on your stand. You have a sort of full barista service there, have everything really nice, and you decide that your sort of draw is going to be to offer everybody a nice cup of coffee. The doors open, 9 o'clock in the morning, and suddenly there's this queue of people outside your stand. You think, ka-ching, look at this, how brilliant. Now, just spend a moment thinking about what actually happens. Imagine the typical visitor is in the queue for, let's say, 5 minutes. And they get to the front of the queue, and then to make a decent cup of coffee takes another 4 or 5 minutes. And then when you get the cup of coffee, it's too hot to drink. So it's going to take 4 or 5 minutes till it cools down, and then you've got to drink it. And that takes another 4 or 5 minutes. And then you can't just bugger off, because that looks like you just came for the free stuff, so you'll pretend you're interested for another 4 or 5 minutes. And suddenly, one visitor has taken up 20, 25 minutes of your time. Remember, your original objective was to see as many people as possible. Clearly, corporate hospitality is not the right objective. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, in terms of what you can do, I guess it's all about being very jealous with the time that you do have. In other words, am I going to sit down with somebody who is a really hot prospect and give them an hour of my time? Or am I better served spending 5 minutes with each of those people, making as many appointments as possible, and then grabbing them afterwards? What is it that you want to do with that time? And what about if you say, I want to go there for new clients? Great. What happens if an existing client rocks up? How are you going to deal with them? How much time do you give them? So all these things are going to eat away at the time that you have. And although it sounds like, I'm in Birmingham for the whole week, it's going to be nice, that time is going to whiz past in terms of good use of that time. Now, you've got to think about why you want to be there. Now, I do this because partly I'm quite interested, and B, I haven't got a life. So I will visit any show in the world. I don't care what it's about, don't care what the products or services, and I'll go up to people at random and I'll ask them why they exhibit, because I'm really quite interested. Right? Now, what follows next, folks, in true Miss World fashion, in reverse order, are the 4 most frequent responses that I have received to my question, why are you here? Scarily in 4th place is that one.
Oh yes, because it's my turn this year. I couldn't come last year, so I'm here this year.
It's a good reason for being there. In 3rd place, even better, is that one.
Oh yes, well, Murphy was sick. Of course, aren't I a hero? I'm just filling in, because they couldn't do without me.
Okay? In second place, unfortunately, doesn't get much better because it's that one. Oh, it's fantastic networking. I'm going to get completely networked. But scarily, folks, the most frequent and the most common response I get is that one. Oh, I don't know. Oh, because someone in marketing booked it. That's why. Oh, I know why we're here. Yes, because we always come. No, we're here because our competitors are here. That's why we're here. And I thought, okay, maybe I'm being a bit unfair. Maybe my question, why are you here, could be misconstrued, could be ambiguous. Doubt it, but benefit of the doubt. So I changed my question. And my question suddenly became, what is your objective for exhibiting? These are my two most frequent responses. In second place, oh, I just want to get through the next few days. You know, it's going to be a nightmare. Oh, I've had to put my out of office on the computer. It's just a nightmare. It's just a horrible life. It's like they miss the whole point of exhibiting. They see it as an inconvenience. They miss the point during those 2 or 3 days of the show. They can do more business than they could the 2 or 3 months either side of it. But the really, really worrying thing, folks, is the top response I get to that question is that. And they'll say, it was a fantastic show. We ran out of brochures by the second. I ran out of business cards in 20 minutes. What? Folks, even at your sort of, subsidised prices, if you do the maths, it is still cheaper to hire a skip. And you can get away an awful lot more brochures than you could at a show. Right? Now, I guess, in the absence of any other metric, why not? But surely you can do better than that. Folks, as I said, I'm not going to go through everybody, but can I just sort of get a couple of ideas in terms of objectives for the things that you guys have come up with in your groups, why or what you hope to achieve by being at Opera Fair this year. So could somebody towards the middle at the back there give us one of theirs? Who's your scribes?
I put meet previous year's target.
Yes.
Put a few more.
Yes.
Educate, network with competitors, launch new technologies, build new relationships with contacts, develop new relationships, enhance brand image, have fun, generate sales leads and inquiries, stalk the competition, and engage competitive advantage.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Anybody else here? Anything to add? You guys, give us some objectives. Who's got a list? So.
A lot of it's been said already, so it's just repeating. To gain customers.
Yep.
To retain customers.
Yep.
Brand awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Increase market share. Increase customer base. To have fun was mentioned already, so that's important. Product demonstrations and to take orders.
Take orders, sell stuff. Good, thank you. Folks, thank you for doing that. I know that sometimes it's sort of difficult to sort of be on the spot and think, but when I do this exercise, typically the sort of things that people come up with are, luckily, the sort of things you've come up with, which is to launch new events or new ideas, new products, show new range, check out the market. They normally say test the market rather than stalk the market or the competition. Assess the competition clearly, promote image, branding, and meet specific buyers, so new buyers, existing buyers, whatever else. Okay, and that's great, because each and every one of these is better than giving away brochures. Right? However, if you want to make a quantum difference for next year, then what I would encourage you to do, folks, is instead of just going for standard objectives, is to get what I would call real objectives. And I've just put down some token random figures here, but it gives you an idea of the sorts of things to think about. So for example, try and get 12 leads, 12, 15, 18, whatever, leads to follow up, or X number of direct sales, if that's applicable to you, or make X number of appointments for inquiries. Yeah? Now, clearly, folks, if you say, I want to make 18 appointments, and you make 18 appointments within the first morning, then great, don't be scared to change your objectives. But at least this way you have A, something to go for, and B, you can assess how well or how badly you've performed relative to those objectives. And these are the ones that will give you a really good way of calculating your return on investment. One of the problems I think that people have with exhibiting is they don't fully understand it. They realise that it's better than a two-dimensional advert, but they think it's the same as buying an advert. And actually, it's not about numbers. It doesn't matter whether 3,000, 4,000, 7,000 come through the doors. You don't want to see all those people, and you can't possibly see all those people. If you imagine a typical 3-day show, if you see a visitor every 5 minutes for just 5 minutes, without so much as a fag break, this fascist world we live in, right? You're only going to get to see about 250 people. And that's it, 5 minutes, every 5 minutes, without a break. So realistically, 5,000, 6,000, it doesn't really matter. you need to identify whom from those 7,000 people you do want to do business with, and what you're going to do to try and attract them on your stand. Now, I'm not going to bang on too much about objectives because they are the most important thing. So clearly, one, agree amongst yourselves as a company what those objectives are going to be. Do, for heaven's sake, folks, make sure that you make them as specific as you can, because less is definitely more. You know, the more objectives you have, the more diluted they become. You know, if your objective is to get some new business, well, branding is going to happen as a result of you being there. You probably will have fun as a result of being there. As long as you don't overdo the fun and sort of be hanging on your stand next morning, it's going to work. Make sure you communicate those objectives to everybody who's on the stand with you. Because again, folks, if people don't realise why you're there, they think, oh, look, it's an existing customer, I'm going to go and talk to them. Now, if your objective is to generate new business, they're going to not do what you want them to do. So again, make sure everybody's focused on the same reason for being there. Now, we know a thing or two about visitors. We know what they like, we know what they dislike. And actually, if you think about it, you know, you are somebody's visitor, so you know what you like about going to a show, and you also know what you dislike about going to a show. And it's quite interesting because we end up building a picture of what we think people want and then doing it. But often what happens is we end up doing what we think the company ought to be doing and then doing that instead. And actually, you've got to try and focus much more on them and what they expect, as opposed to focusing on us and what we want to do at the show. Because without that understanding of what your visitor wants from you, there's not going to be that much engagement going on. And the key to this is all about engagement. I'm making a big assumption that you're the scribe for this group.
Yes.
Could you give us your feedback in terms of what you think that visitor likes about us are?
Face-to-face contact. People always want to see new things, new products. To be entertained.
Yep.
To be educated.
For sure.
To network. Colleague catch-up, so see people that haven't seen for a while, maybe a few years, that kind of thing. Clients like meeting the staff of the companies, perhaps they've spoken to them on the phone. They like the freebies.
They like the freebies, yes.
Champagne and CDs and things like that, and pens.
And anything, yes.
They like speaking with specialists, so people who are knowledgeable, they can put their brains find out more about like a certain product.
Very important.
Something like that. It's a really sort of relaxed, informal kind of atmosphere where they don't feel pressured to buy, they can take their time just to stand, maybe contemplate what they want and go back and drill down more and buy that kind of stuff.
Impressive, thank you. Negatives. Other than the opposites though, do you have any specific negatives?
Lack of knowledge by salespeople.
Yes.
Pushy salespeople.
Yes.
Tripping over things on the stand, or tripping up as you go out the platform or something. Equipment not working.
Oh.
Not enough staff, so you can't talk to somebody that you specifically want to. Not being taken seriously, trying to be sort of hooked on basically somebody else instead. Then signage to lectures and seminars, which is probably more general.
Yep.
Too crowded in the stand. It's too busy.
Too busy.
They might come back later. Not enough catering resting areas. And running out of brochures or equally too many brochures to carry around.
Thank you. I think we've all, you sort of end up with these bowling ball arms as they just get heavier and heavier. Have a brochure. Thank you. You guys, positive expectations. Who's your scribes person?
They expect education
Yep.
to collect their professional points. Purchase products, could be equipment, frame, learning, learn about new suppliers and new product ranges.
Yep.
To meet friends and to network. They always expect a discount.
Yes.
They expect a deal.
Yeah.
They love their freebies. Everyone wants to walk away from the exhibition with their free bag of samples.
Yeah.
They want to try out the new equipment. Learn something new from not just the exhibitors, but also from the friends that they're meeting at the shows and just network just generally with friends. Get a new job.
Yes.
When they're measuring against theirs with other visitors or exhibitors from a benchmarking point of view, see how they're sizing up.
Yep.
That's it. And just at the end, they do expect when they turn up to have a full pool of varied exhibitors.
Yeah. Spot on. Interesting thing about the freebies, folks, because I think the freebie thing, it's almost like a mentality that they have that appeals to the lot of hunter-gatherer. It's like, I went to the showcase, look what I've got, frisbees, balls, whatever. And the interesting thing is they don't sort of make a distinction between something that is designed to be a freebie and a mobile phone that just happens to be lying there.
I'm just going to say, when I walked around some shows, I've always found it quite amusing that if you leave your pen on the side, next minute it's gone.
Yeah, it's not what I thought it was very. Yeah, thank you. And dislikes, guys, what were the negative expectations?
I'm going to be harassed by sales people.
Yes.
The facilities are going to be poor, too warm, sticky, it's often you find that in exhibitions.
Yep.
I'm going to be on my feet all day. All my emails are going to be building up back in the office for when I get back. It's a waste of my time. I'm seeing nothing new. My employees are going to let me down by getting drunk.
Yes. networking.
I'd rather play golf.
Yeah.
The education sessions are boring. My buyers are going to buy too much. The exhibition's getting smaller every year. There's nothing new to see. The location and cost to get there is too expensive.
Actually, quite depressed. Yeah. Thank you. It's interesting, folks, because just listening to that, there's an awful lot of patterns that you guys clearly have witnessed firsthand, either as a visitor or just by being aware of it. The interesting thing, there's lots of research that's been done in terms of visitor research, what they like, what they dislike, what they do. What would you say, because you mentioned it, what would you say is the number one reason that most visitors will attend an event? Number one reason, folks, is they're there to find out what's new, what's the latest, da-da-da. They will network as part of a consequence of being there, but they're there primarily by what is new, what's the latest. And the second main reason people go?
Special offers?
Offers in a way, but usually it's because they have a problem in the back of their mind. And what happens is as they get talking to you, they go, oh, by the way, do you guys do, oh, do you? And then out comes the true issue. Okay? So we know, again, from research that engagement is the key to this. It's not about, oh, I happen to be passing your stand, great, I'll place an order, goodbye. It's normally once you've engaged them that these problems emerge. They don't sort of walk in necessarily with the problem uppermost in their mind. Main wind-ups, again, you've got this one. What do you say is the main wind-up for a visitor? Yeah. Being sold to. Let's just backtrack slightly. What was one of your main objectives for going to the show? Yeah. Potential clash. And the second main wind-up, again, you also got this one, which is really good news, is they ask you a question, you go, oh, I don't know. Oh, the person that can answer that question is on lunch. Can you come back later? Oh, they're not here today, they're here tomorrow. Can you come back tomorrow? And actually people don't just go, oh, can't get the answer, I'll go home. What they'll do is they'll keep on asking until they find out. And once they do find out, it's usually that person or that company that they end up doing the work with or placing the order with. So, some of this research is quite interesting, folks, but it's also, the physicality, but also how that message is conveyed. So, for example, the latest stats will show you that the words that you use only account for about 7% of that communication. How you say it is nearly 40%. That's the difference between have a nice day and have a nice day. It's like, okay. But the balance, of course, is, as they would call body talk, you and I would call it body language. So it's everything about standing on the front of your stand with your toe caps protruding in the aisle, your arms folded, possibly maybe a clipboard or something just for added protection, and then you start sort of like scowling at people. You see it so often, folks. And actually a lot of this is quite interesting because it's fairly predictable, and also you can predict. As an exhibitor, you have the ability to predict behaviour. You can see what your visitors are about to do or not to do. Now, if you predict they're going to stop on your stand and talk to you, great, let them. But if your prediction says they're going to walk past me, then you need to do something to influence that behaviour so that they do actually stop and talk to you. Now, predicting, it's probably, let's start with predicting. Predicting is to me, one of the most interesting. Predicting is what Paul Daniels does, but he calls it magic. And people go, oh, how does he do that? And actually, it's quite easy. He just predicted what's likely to happen next. Well, the first bit of good news is you don't actually have to be a member of the magic circle. We can all predict, okay? A very basic example, if you see someone standing downstairs in the car park, you are all able to predict that they will feel much less scared doing that than if they were perched up on the roof hanging by their fingertips. That's all the prediction is. Yeah, it's reading a situation and knowing the likely outcome. The second thing about prediction, folks, is you need to be able to recognize that you should be able to predict better than chance alone. If all you're establishing are the laws of chance, that's called guessing. I'm talking about knowing the likely outcome significantly better than the laws of chance. And then I suppose the nice bit is you can predict both thoughts and behavior. Now, behavior is the fun part. Behavior is why we sit on a pavement cafe and watch people. So predicting behavior is quite fun, and we can try that experiment if you like. I'll preface this with just the comment that I am a little bit colourblind, not that that matters too much. All I'm going to ask you guys to do, if you would, is just take your left palm, put your right elbow in it, and form a loose fist, remaining hand. So left palm, right elbow, loose fist. So it should look like that. That's it, your other left. Okay. Now, all I'm going to ask you to do in a second, folks, is I'm going to ask you to show me on your fingers the number of people I can see in the room wearing a particular colour. Okay? If we were in Norwich now, I'd say show me 6. The colour I'm going to go for is red. I can see 2 people in the room wearing red. Please show me the number 2 on your fingers. Go on, have a look. Most of you have all done that, or that. Yep, thank you, relax, chill out. Now, the interesting thing is prediction suggests that most people would, in fact, do that. Why did you do that and not that, or that, or that? Why did we go for that or that? Easier? And habit, I think, is probably more accurate. Folks, it's not easy or think about it, it's not easy. If it was easy or natural, and I say count up to 5 on one hand, how would you do it? Well, most people go thumb, 2, 3, 4 finger. But you can go finger, 2, 3, 4 thumb. And if I say count and point, people go thumb, 2, 3, 4 finger, or finger, 2, 3, 4 thumb. Nobody goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You don't start with those 2 fingers, it's not natural. It's not easier, it's habit. You do the same experiment in England, America, Australia, New Zealand, Western Europe. You say, go to, most people do that or that. Now, the interesting thing with prediction, folks, is behavior is fun. Where it becomes really usable is when you can start to predict how people think. Because we know you can predict behavior of your visitors. You can predict how they're going to stand. You know, if you approach them, you know their normal reaction. If you get too close, they'll want to back off. If you don't look at them when you're talking to them and you're talking to somebody else in case there's someone more important, they're going to feel that they're not important, which is one of the things, again, that you guys highlighted. So that stuff we know. But can we actually start to predict thought processes? Now, again, it's got to be better than chance alone. Now, I spend most of my life effectively teaching people how to sell stuff. And the really interesting thing is that years ago, even as little as 10 years ago, I guess, my agendas used to be called things like, the secrets of blah, blah, blah. Almost like it was some mysterious thing that the sales guru had to impart to you. Actually, if you think about it, selling is the oldest profession in the world. What you sell changes, but it's the oldest profession. And the interesting thing about it is because it's been around for so long, we know a thing or 3 about it. We know that certain things work better than chance alone, and we know that certain things don't work better than chance alone. I'm not going to get hung up on the process, folks, but just as a concept, things that we know consistently work better than chance alone. Okay? We know, for example, if that's your basic sales process, which starts with introduction, you ask your questions, you tell them what they need to buy, handle their objections, close, and get the money. If that's the basic process, there are certain things we know happen consistently above and beyond the laws of chance, every time. Now, for example, we know if you start your conversation and you elicit positive responses from your customer, we know we're much more likely to get a positive outcome at the end. The interesting thing is we also know the flip is true. In other words, if you start with a negative from the customer, you're much more likely to end up with a negative at the end. What else do we know? Well, we do know that if you ask them questions first, and then you tell them all about your products and services, you will have a far better outcome than if you start off by telling them all about your products and services and say, oh, by the way, what about you? In other words, we know that that second approach doesn't work nearly as well as the first approach. What else? Well, we know the more questions you ask up front, the fewer objections you're likely to get later. Again, significantly better than chance alone. And interestingly enough, we also know the flip is true. In other words, if you don't ask enough questions, you're going to get shed loads of objections and spend all your time handling objections. Right? And so on and so on. So the point is, folks, the sales process is incredibly predictable. Now, it's so predictable that I genuinely believe this, if I have a good salesperson who is talking to the decision maker, that salesperson knows the outcome significantly better than chance alone. So you imagine your salespeople have got, let's say, 10 proposals out there. By the laws of chance, they're going to get 2 back, saying yes, maybe 3, by chance alone. But imagine if they start getting 5 out of 10 back, or 6, or 7, or 8. That would be significant. Now, I believe it's so predictable, it is technically possible to phone someone up at random that you've never spoken to before and say, yo, customer dude, look, it's me. You don't know who I am yet, because I know you're expecting the introduction, and I'm going to do it expecting lots of positives from you and avoiding all the negatives, because I know that works. Then I'm going to ask you questions, shed loads of questions, first. Then, once I've asked you my questions, I'm going to tell you what I think you ought to buy from me. The moment I tell you what you need to buy from me, the chances are you will give me an objection. I have been on a sales training course, I will handle it very well indeed, and then I'm going to close you, at which point you'll give me some money. So my proposition is as follows. We can either go through this painful 20-25 minute conversation at the end of which you give me some money, or you can just give me some money now and save yourself 25 minutes. What do you think? Well, I think you can do that apart from one small fact, and that one small fact is nobody likes a smartass. So if the customer believes or feels that this is a foregone conclusion, they will say no because they can. Right? Remember what we said, folks, when we were talking about likes and dislikes and blah, blah, blah. We said we want to sell to them, but we also said their number one hate is being sold to. So we've got to do it in such a way that they feel that they are buying from us, not that we are selling to them. Think about this. It's a truism. You guys are all somebody's customer. You go to a shop, you want to feel you've got the money in your pocket, and you know what you want to buy. The last thing you want to do or feel is that you've gone into the shop, up to the counter, and the sales assistant has sold you something. And the sad reality is we've all bought more things than we like to give credit for, but at the time of purchase, it should have felt like it was our decision. So coming back to my analogy, what we know is that a good salesperson knows that the customer doesn't want to believe that the end result is a foregone conclusion. So all a good salesperson does is they simply disguise that last step. So they create the illusion that the conversation can go in any direction it wants to, but strangely and inexorably they go, how much and where do I sign? Now, I'm going to try and show you how... Sorry, does that make sense? Okay. I'm going to try and show you how to do this. Now, you'll see I'm using PowerPoint. So would you accept that my next slide is a foregone conclusion? In other words, there is nothing that I can do to change my next slide now, unless you, obviously you could see me if I did it, but would you accept that as long as I don't do that, yeah? Foregone conclusion. Okay. Now my next slide happens to be a rather strange and bizarre slide. I haven't put something like, what time is this going to finish? Because you might be thinking that. And I haven't put something on there like, what's for lunch? Because you might be thinking that too. What I've put on there is so strange and weird. Even if you are a complete and utter psycho, nothing, right? Even if you're that weird, you still wouldn't be thinking, what's on my next slide? That's how weird my next slide is. Now, my challenge is I'm going to try and influence you guys into thinking what's on my next slide and do it in such a way it should feel like it is your decision to think it. And I hope to do it better than chance alone, significantly better than chance alone. If any of you are naive enough to believe that you are an individual and not a number, this is a good time to believe it. Right? All I'm going to do, folks, I'm going to stay at the front of the room, and I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and at the end of it, we'll see whether you end up thinking what I want you to think. And despite warning you, I should still be able to do it. That's how powerful I think this technique is. So, if you would, folks, and you can do this in your head or you can do it on a piece of paper, but I'll say at the front, pick a number. Any number you like, between 1 and 10 inclusive. And the number you pick should feel like it is your decision to pick it. Just in case any of you are more cynical than I gave you credit for, and you think, yeah, he's probably already planted a number, I now give you a second choice. And that second choice is stick or twist. In other words, either stick with your original number, or you may now change your mind to any other number you like, between 1 and 10 inclusive. Okay? Okay, making the assumption you've all settled upon a number between 1 and 10 inclusive. Think of your number, and now let's do a little bit of maths. I'm going to ask you to multiply your number. No, let's make it hard. Multiply your number by 9. And some of you are thinking, shit, I wish I'd chosen one. It would have been so much simpler. Why did I have to go for 7? Why? Okay, I'm making 2 assumptions. Assumption number 1, you've all done it. Assumption number 2, more importantly, you've all done it correctly. Assuming you have, prediction suggests that most of you in the room, but not all of you, will now have a 2-digit number. Yeah? If you're one of the people with a 2-digit number, add your 2 digits together. So if you've got 21, 2 plus 1, it's 3. Okay? So add them together. So everybody in the room should now have a single-digit number. And we want to make that number a bit smaller. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Take away 5 from your number, please. The good news is the maths is finished, but it's important that you remember your residual number, because the number you are now left with corresponds to the appropriate letter from the alphabet. So if you've got 1, it's A, 2B, 3C, 4D, and so on. Match your number to the letter of the alphabet, and I'd like you to think of your personal letter of the alphabet. Starting with your letter of the alphabet, I would now like you to think of any country in the world beginning with that letter, and think of the second letter of that country. Now, starting with that second letter of that country, I would like you to think about a very large grey animal. I am rather hoping that many of you are thinking of one of those. Right? Quick show of hands, folks, just out of interest, how many people were? Okay, more than, okay, thank you. I'm going to explain how I did this in a second, but before I do that, can I just ask a question? I don't expect it was a lot, but did you feel like you had some choice? Some, okay. Well, the interesting thing is whatever number you chose doesn't really matter. And whether you change your mind or not doesn't really matter, because if you do the maths correctly, you will always end up with the number 4. 4 is always the letter D. If you did not end up with D, it was a maths problem, right? Assuming you got as far as D, then I did actually give you, genuinely, a completely free choice. I said any country in the world beginning with D. The problem is Denmark pops into your head. But you could have thought of Dubai, Dominican Republic, Djibouti, but most people don't. And then the second letter of Denmark is an E. And then I hit you with the next really tricky question. A large grey animal beginning with an E. You think, oh, elephant, bing! But again, you could have thought of elk or emu or eagle, but most people don't. So the way this works is how most people think most of the time in a given situation. Folks, let me just repeat that a second. It's how most people think most of the time in a given situation. How much more of a given situation do you need than an exhibition hall full of visitors? It's so predictable. You know, folks, and you've done it yourselves. You walk up to any visitor in the hall, and if you ask them the question, can I help you? You can predict the answer better than the laws of chance alone. And sometimes it has the word off in it. Right? But we keep doing this. Why do we do this? You know, the whole point of this is we need to be able to predict that this goes on. We need to identify from that sea of visitors the ones we want to talk to. We need to predict those people that come in that have actually got potential, and they are the ones we want to sell to. Now, I've tried to assemble almost what I would call my frequently asked questions. You know, I run these things fairly often, and obviously I tend to be asked the same sort of things. So I'm going to go through all the things I'm usually asked about, and clearly if there's anything that you want to know, we can address that as well. Question number 1, should we wear a uniform? Now, by uniform, I don't mean, gold braid, peak cap, blah, blah, blah. What I mean is, should we all look the same? And the answer is absolutely yes, you should. If you're all going to be in suits, then everybody should be in a suit. And if it should be black, it should be black. Not black with a fleck, or black with a stripe, or black with a tinge. It should be black. Because you should look uniform. And the reason for that, folks, is something that we've all done in real life. And that is, you're in a shop, usually, and you hunt high and low, and you can't find it anywhere. Eventually, in desperation, because you have to be desperate, you turn to the sales assistant and go, excuse me, do you stock such and such? They go, oh, I'm sorry, I don't work here. They go, oh, I'm sorry for thinking you're the sort of person who does. She goes, no, I'm sorry for giving you the impression I'm the sort of person. And you don't know who's more embarrassed. Now, the point is this. If I walk onto your stand and I can see two of you talking to each other, as colleagues do, but you're dressed differently, I don't know whether you just happen to be colleagues dressed differently or one of you happens to be a visitor. And if I interrupt you and one of you is a visitor, I'm going to look like a prune. Rather than put myself in that position, I'll think, well, I'll come back later. And I either don't come back later or somebody else grabs me. But if I can see that the two of you belong and work on that stand, I'm far more likely to come and talk to you than if I'm not too sure. And that extends to everything, folks. If you're going to wear ties, everybody should wear a tie. Not some yes, some not. And it's normally the boss that cocks this up because they go, oh, I'm going to be different. Don't be. Same with badges. You've got a badge, you wear your badge and you wear your badge up here. You don't put it on your belt. No matter how trendy it is, people don't look at your crotch for your name, right? It's up here. It's part of the uniform. Make sure it's clean and tidy, folks. Again, if I had a bit of advice, and I appreciate this is down to resources and how big you are as a company, if you have the ability, appoint one person to be your stand manager. And their job should have no customer interaction whatsoever. Their entire job should be to make sure as many of these things actually happen as possible. It needs to be functional. You know, we said on the clean and tidy and functional, people don't like tripping up over stuff. They don't like queuing on a stand. They like a busy stand. All these things you can do something about. Get rid of those coffee cups and the newspapers and the umbrellas and the handbags and all that stuff. And if your visitors are banging their head on the hanging basket as they walk onto your stand, no matter how beautiful it looks, get rid of it or move it. If it's not working, move it. You'll see in the photographs, a couple of simple little moves would have made it really good. Next question is, should we have a gimmick? Do gimmicks work? I suppose there's all sorts of gimmicks. The most common gimmick happens to be a cardboard box with a slot in the top, and it's like, put in your card and win champagne or salmon. And the question I get asked is, Simon, do these things work? And the answer is yes, they work incredibly well at getting names and addresses of people who like eating salmon or drinking champagne. Not necessarily very good at getting names and addresses of people that are going to be your potential customers. So if you are going to do that, then don't put in an iPad or whatever, because everybody wants one of those. Do something, ideally, related to what you do, that will only appeal to the type of customer you're trying to attract. So as an example, we did some work for the boat show, and one guy decided that he was going to offer a free, complimentary, boat cleaning service. His box wasn't overflowing with business cards, but every single business card in there was somebody who actually had a boat that wanted it cleaned. And weirdos, of course, who probably chose black or bed. Right? So gimmicks are great, but it's not about just the gimmick. The gimmick's a great way of getting people onto your stand. It's a great way of intriguing them. It's a great way of interacting with them. But ideally, again, if you can make it related to product and service, that works really well. Brochures, folks, come the revolution. I will ban these, especially nowadays with our sort of green credentials. But I appreciate that some people think, I know we've got to have a brochure and people expect it, That's fine. We already know that people don't like walking away with lots and lots of bags. So if you are going to have brochures, think about how you're going to display them. We went to one particular show where we assessed the efficacy of different types. We had just a pile of brochures. We had some fanned-out displays. We had a load just strewn on the table, and we had the freestanding literature racks and the wall-mounted racks. Of those ones I've just mentioned, which would you say is the least effective way of vending brochures? Fan display. Fan display, not good. That's anal. Visitors don't like it. And more to the point, you can see them walk up to the table and see the display, and they stress about where they're going to take one from so they don't ruin your display. And worse than that, occasionally you will see the stand holder who realizes that a visitor has had the audacity to ruin their display. They huff, stand up, and go and rearrange it. And it ripples like a pool around. Oh, look at that. Don't do it. Don't do it. Doesn't work. It's no good. Likewise, the second least effective, or more effective, whichever way you're going, is just the box of brochures. Because you've got a pile of brochures, people don't know if that's your personal stock or whether they're meant to help themselves. And what they'll do is they'll approach your pile of brochures, furtively look over both shoulders, grab one and leg it down the aisles, which for interaction is not great. Next actually was the freestanding literature racks, because as long as they were full, or the wall mounted, as long as they were full, they worked really well. But the moment you go down to your last one or two in any pocket, people seem to be reluctant to take the last one of anything. So as long as they're well stocked, they actually work well. But strangely, the most effective seem to have been a pile of brochures. I'm not saying strewn everywhere, but just on a table. People pick them up, come up to it and start flicking through it, and then you can approach them. So it's clear it's for their use. It seems to be quite a useful way and a good way of vending it. As with all these things, folks, you'd expect a list of do's and don'ts. Here are some of the most common do's and obviously some of the most common don'ts. Do take shifts and breaks. I know it sounds very Janet and John. The problem is if you don't take shifts and breaks, people want to have lunch, let's say, at lunchtime. And often that's when a lot of your visitors walk past your stand. You don't want to have an empty stand when people are walking past at lunchtime. Likewise, if you don't have shifts and breaks, folks, what will happen is, because I mentioned already, we live in fascist no-smoking times, to go out for a cigarette is a bull. You've got to walk miles to go and do that. So by the time you get there, you think, oh, hang on, I want to have another one while I'm here. And all the smokers will be outside networking, and all the non-smokers on the stand working their butts off. My heart bleeds not. Right. Do be natural. Don't buy new shoes. They will crucify your feet. But by being natural, I also mean don't make somebody do something they wouldn't normally do. Now, that could be, if you've got a shy, retiring wallflower, don't thrust them to the front of the stand, make them try and get people onto the stand. It doesn't work. Because the whole body language say, I'm terrified, I don't want to be here, please don't talk to me. And visitors are very accommodating when they see that. The second thing about being natural, folks, sometimes, I guess if you decide, right, we're going to wear suits, imagine you've got somebody who works for you who doesn't normally wear a suit. No matter how many Hugo Boss Armani labels you give them, they will still look like somebody who doesn't normally wear a suit wearing a suit. Right? It might be about the techie and the sale. Great. Well, sometimes they have this unfortunate term called the hooker. And their job is to hook people off the aisles and go, hi, George. George, meet techie. Techie, meet George. Boom, next. Introduction. Existing customer. Come and meet Fred. Fred, this is an existing customer. So you can actually play to your strengths, but again, give people natural roles because they will do those roles and play those roles better than people who don't. Looking busy is a good tip, folks. 2 types of busy: good busy, bad busy. Good busy is a sort of busy where it looks like it's fine to be interrupted. So examples of good busy are, tidying up the brochures, restocking the literature racks, getting rid of coffee cups, newspapers. That's all good busy. Bad busy is anything that implies that you are busy, engaged, or would be pissed off if somebody interrupted you. And that includes a whole list of things from reading magazines, eating, all that stuff. Bad busy. Good busy helps. I know that one of the things that I do as a tip whenever I exhibit, the first thing I do, the first day of the show, I will invite all my friends onto my stand to make it busy at 9 o'clock in the morning. And by friends, I mean tame clients. And I'll get them there by hook or crook or bribery. Bribery usually works. And so you've got a stand that's rocking first thing in the morning. And that does 2 things. One, psychologically, everybody else goes, oh, he's really busy and we're not, and number 2, a busy stand, people go, oh, why is that so busy? And they come and join it, and suddenly you get even busier. Right? So there's lots of things you can do, but think about how you can look good busy, not bad busy. And think up questions, folks. I know this sounds really Janet and John, but actually, if you don't think up questions, the most natural question in the world will be, can I help you? And we already know what the answer to that one is. So the sort of questions I'm thinking of are things like, how familiar are you with our products and services? Because actually, by that one question, you can find out how knowledgeable they are about the marketplace. They might mention which of your competitors they've looked at. If you've got good product knowledge, you'll know roughly therefore what their budget happens to be. You might know what their buying cycle is in terms of how soon and how urgent and where they are in that buying cycle. The problem with these is these are not what I would call first-line questions. You can't be stood at the front of your stand going, oh, and how familiar are you now? I didn't think so. Yeah. Right? So you need your ice-breaking bit. Hi, how's it going? What's the weather doing out there? I'm gagging for a fag. I can only do it with a customer. Do you want to come and join me? Doesn't matter what you say. Something to break the ice. Qualify if you need to, and then you can get into your questions. Clearly, all these do's are great, but there's also some obvious don'ts, and some of those are, I suppose, more interesting than others. The first thing is I would say don't hover, glide, or pounce. The other thing people tend to do, actually, I've no idea why, is what I call the crab walk. So they're on their stand like that, and suddenly they start doing that. Like that. What is that all about? You don't do that in real life. Why do you not do a stand? What the hell's going on? The other perennial exhibiting favourite, folks, is hunting. Do you know what I mean by hunting? Hunting is where you maintain, you actually spot a visitor and you make eye contact with them at the far back of the hall and you track them down every single aisle like that. And as they approach you, they'll go right, and right again and re-emerge behind you. You think, what the hell's going on? The people manning your stand, folks, need to understand that eye contact with a smile is a good thing. But eye contact without a smile is quite scary, right? So again, be aware of what the people on the stand are doing. What's the messaging that they're giving off? Don't eat, drink or smoke. Not that I'm elitist, drinkist or fascist. The reason for this is typically, and smoking is obvious now, but the eating and drinking typically is 2 things. One, it's bad busy. I'm on my break, having my lunch, leave me alone, and they will. And number 2 is eating and drinking typically creates mess. So if you do want to eat and drink on the stand, can I recommend a competitive stand and Cornish pasties, because they fragment everywhere. Don't sit down. Folks, even if you have chairs or stools built into your stand, don't use them. If a customer sits down, yes, sit down with them. But if the stand is quiet, don't just sit down because it's quiet, because people will think you're on your break. And then you have to stand up and you feel more tired by doing that. So it's far better to remain on your feet, be standing all day, and only use the chairs if the customer's sitting down, because again, it's a bad, busy example. This is not extensive. Don't use mobiles, laptops, mobile. With mobiles, it used to be a thing where people would, almost like a status symbol, I'm going to check my messages because how important I am. And then they realised people didn't really like it, so what they did is a bit more surreptitious, and it looks like they're urinating on the back wall of the stand like that. Don't do it. You can, if you have your shifts and your breaks, you know you're only 20 minutes away from the next mobile phone fix. That's fine. That's far better to do that than feel, oh, I need to check it. I've just buzzed in my pocket. Oh my God, what's going on? And certainly don't use it. It's very, very bad busy. Likewise, folks, it's quite natural for you guys to meet your colleagues, especially those who are different branches or whatever. You don't get together that often. You say, oh, George, about that thing. And you're talking about work, which is great, but actually it's a very expensive meeting room that you are hiring for the next few days. So again, stand manager, break up those meetings. And certainly this doesn't apply to any of you guys, but I wouldn't, a voice of experience, manning a stand with a hangover is the devil's own work. And yes, I fully appreciate you might be, networking with your clients all night. And if you are on the networking team, then you shouldn't be on the let's man the stand first thing in the morning team. So either split them up, have a rota, have a system, so that you're not trying to be all things to all people. Also, folks, remember that whatever takes place during the 2-3 days of the show is probably only a small activity in terms of the overall results that you'll get. I get people coming up and say, hello, Simon, do you remember us? And I go, Sorry, no. They go, oh, yeah, we came on your stand this year. And I go, that's funny, I wasn't there this year. So, oh, I must have been last year. So the point is, like 18 months later, I'm picking up business that I hadn't realised I'd picked up when I was doing my calculation in terms of how well it worked. And the other obvious thing to say, folks, is about following up your leads. Now, when I first did this, I thought, oh, this is so obvious, it's so basic. But actually, you'll see there I've got a sort of silhouette of a percentage sign. Because we did some surveys with your customers, and as in organisers, and you guys as exhibitors. And amongst one of the questions we asked of you guys exhibitors was, how often do you follow up your leads, and how many of you admit to not following up your leads correctly? And this percentage is the number of people that admitted to not following up their leads correctly. Would you be surprised if I told you it was as high as 20%? No, didn't follow up. Higher. 40% didn't follow up. Higher. 50% don't follow up on their leads. How about 60%? How about if I told you it was actually 75% admitted to not following up their leads? We work with contractors, folks who build up and break down your stands. And they will tell us that on average, at least once per show, as they're dismantling someone's stand, they kick this thing, oh, what's that? And it rattles. And they pick it up and take the lid off, and it's full of business cards.
No one told me to take it. I thought marketing would take it. I didn't know it was my job to take it. I thought you had it.
They leave the whole point of going to the show on their stand. Or they, then goes to data entry, and data entry get it, and then eventually it goes to marketing, and marketing get it, well, that was really good, we do well, and eventually it goes to the salespeople. By that time, it's too late. Now, in terms of following up, folks, make sure you've got some way of recording, because not everybody will have business cards. People will run out of business cards, and some people won't want to give you a business card. Some of you guys will have light pens, some of you will have handhelds, some of you will have a tablet. Do you want a tablet? It doesn't matter what you use, but less is more. So, capture their name, their email address, maybe their phone number, because if the email address is wrong, you've got the phone number, and the other way around. That's probably all you need as a basic. But if you do need the buying process, if you need their plan or their budget or anything that's special, have that there. But again, folks, think about the psychology. You approach someone with a clipboard and a pen going, oh, I'll just take down a few details. It's, oh, God. So psychologically, shrink it down from A4 to A2, whatever it is. Pre-print it, so all you have to do is tick, circle, or whatever. And that's get if you do, yeah, it's great. Or, scan them or whatever it happens to be. And then that way you can send at the end of each day an email saying, template, just saying, really good to see you on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. As promised, here is our brochure, click PDF attached, and we will call you on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Because you might still be at the show the next day, but they might be back in their office, and all of a sudden up pops your email with your logo and your credentials. Folks, don't be scared to contact those customers. As long as it's relevant, it's fine. And also I've put there some sort of rating. You need to work out whether it's hot, warm, or cold. And you need to agree that amongst yourselves. You're all using the same classification, whether it's 1 to 10 or whatever. But the problem is if you just give a pile of leads to a salesperson, human nature is they go, never heard of them, never heard. Oh, they're really close to where I live. I'll call them next. A big name, yeah, I'll call them next too. And actually in that pile of people they're going to come back to could be some people that are really hot to trot. And if you don't call them, probably somebody else will. By the time you do get to them, it's too late. So work out the ones that need to be called in the next day or 2 days and the ones that can actually wait a bit longer. Okay, we're getting very close to end time, so what I'd like to do is just summarise and then we'll look at a couple of photographs. One, make sure you agree your objectives. Why are you there? What are you doing? Does everybody on the stand know that? Secondly, do utilise all the PR stuff that's available up front, folks. Most of this stuff is available to you. It doesn't necessarily cost you any more money to do it. But it is worth it. Don't just rely on the organisers to invite. If you think there's some people that need to be at the show, either invite them yourselves or work with the organisers to get them to the show. Somebody says, oh, I don't want to invite my key customers. If they're a key customer, chances are it's their job to come to the show anyway. And it's far better they come with an invite from you than an invite from one of your competitors. Folks, out of the email thing, less than 5% of companies do bother with PR. Less than 5% of exhibitors. Why? Do identify who it is that you actually want to see, who you want to do business with, who is going to be one of your prospects, and then think about what can we do to encourage those guys onto our stand. And clearly, the more you know about them, the better it's going to be. If they like pink, make sure everything is pink. If you know they hate pink, have nothing that is pink. Have some way of capturing those details, and do please make sure that you follow up, because it's madness not to. There's one last thing I'd like to leave you with as a thought, and that's something that's not often in the books, but something that I think is nonetheless very important, because I think it can make a big difference to your success rate at a show. If you go to the show, for heaven's sake, look like you're enjoying yourself. If I see two stand, one of them looks like they're having fun, and the other guy's being terribly professional, standing there like, I'm not going to go talk to them. We do business with people we naturally tend to like. And if it looks like it's more fun there than there, that's where I'm going to go. So don't have people on the stand because it's their turn. Don't have people there because they volunteered to be. Have people there that want to be there, because if they can communicate that to your visitors, you'll have a far more successful show. Thank you very much, and see you soon. Good luck. Lunch is next door.